All right, Santa with me now. Caitlin McGee-White, Fox News contributor, Steamboat Institute fellow, and Megan Hayes, former Biden director of message planning. I just want to roll off of what we heard Ayanna Pressley say there. This is unconstitutional. It's unlawful. I know that she wasn't in Congress back in 2016 when the Obama administration was doing exactly the same thing, but I expect she would have been shouting the same thing from the rooftops.
I think that what people are trying to say is there's no due process happening here, and there are things that they are doing that are unlawful.
Okay,
They're not trained.
The same thing was happening in 2016
and there weren't
under
these
Obama,
riots. And there were not these same sort of riots. So I don't think that you can compare the two. And Obama actually deported more people.
But why weren't there the same sort of riots?
Because they weren't doing it in the same manner. They had people who were trained, who were getting more than just 6 weeks of training, who were not showing up in Minneapolis.
He was also a Democratic president, and Democrats were calling out the Democratic president.
I am telling you why there were no riots then, because they had ICE agents who were trained, who were working with people who were doing targeted raids. These are not targeted raids. Going into a Target and arresting people in the vestibule of Target who are American citizens, and it's all on video, that is not constitutional. That is not lawful. People are not getting
Have you seen the
process.
list of people that ICE arrested in Minneapolis?
Absolutely, and I'm all for people
Are any of them citizens?
Have we seen the list of people they've arrested that are citizens? No.
So here's the big difference between what happened back in 2016 and what's happening now. Back in 2016, you did not have a handful of Democratic cities and states declare themselves sanctuaries from federal immigration enforcement, refusing to cooperate with federal immigration enforcement. That is why ICE was able to do targeted raids at that time. Now, ICE has to go into these cities, and they do have to go into neighborhoods. They do have to go into places because the local law enforcement is not allowing them into courthouses, into jails, to get these people who they have detainers on. And it's simply not true that ICE is harassing American citizens, as some Democrats are claiming. The publicly available data from DHS shows that all of the arrests from last year, 7 out of 10 were from criminal illegal migrants. These are people who had past criminal convictions or people with pending criminal charges. Those are the people that ICE is trying to target, and yet Democratic officials are making it extremely difficult for them to do so.
Let me just add a little bit of context to that. In 2016, Chicago was a sanctuary city. They did not cooperate with the federal government. CNN, Pamela Brown, did a whole ride-along with ICE in 2016 in Chicago, in which it was reported by her several times that the reason why ICE has to go in and do these raids is because the city of Chicago does not cooperate with them. They had to go in and knock down doors. They actually arrested the wrong person. And it was kind of like, oops, well, this is what happens when the city doesn't cooperate with the federal government. The real big difference, and you got to admit this, Megan, between 2016 and 2026 is a Democratic president. Barack Obama was in charge of ICE, and this year it's Donald Trump who's in charge of ICE, and people don't like that.
You can say that all you want, but the polling that's coming out, that came out literally yesterday, is saying 31% of the people do not think their cities are safer. 31% of people think the cities are safer with ICE activities. That means the majority of people, including independents and Republicans, do not feel that their cities are safer with ICE activities. That was not the same in 2016. Trump's polling, his own polling, has gone from +8 to -11 just since he's been president on his immigration.
Oh, okay.
People agree with the policy. They don't agree with the way they are enforcing it.
But we played this yesterday, and it was a question to Josh Earnest in the White House briefing room in 2016. A reporter said very calmly, with absolutely no spin in his voice, people are scared, they're going in, the children are fearful, they're being arrested, they're being taken out, they're being deported. Same thing is happening, yet there's not the outrage. Same thing.
Well, I think now you have the Democratic Party leaning very hard into the open borders agenda, which really had not come to full fruition back during the Obama administration. And now the reason why they explicitly oppose ICE, and yes, they want to abolish the agency altogether, is because it's probably the only government agency whose sole purpose is to protect American sovereignty, to protect American identity. And those are both things that undermine the left's open borders agenda. So this has become a sticking point for the new Democratic Party. They're not going to abandon that position.
Just one more point here. So you're saying that, the difference between 2016 and now is there was targeted raids and whatever. Well, ICE was doing targeted raids. But then people were tracking ICE activity on apps. They were showing up. They were throwing things at them. We saw rocks thrown through windows of vehicles. We see people blocking the roadways, as tragically happened last week. I mean, a big difference is people weren't called to action in 2016 to actively interfere with ICE. And the fact that the local law enforcement will not back up ICE causes them, as Greg Bavino was saying, to surge all of these forces to protect their buildings, to protect themselves from the protesters.
But I think we are also in this position because when these raids first started, there was a lack of due process. Donald Trump and Kristi Noem put a bunch of people
on. There was a lack of due process in 2016 too.
They put a bunch of people on airplanes and they sent them away when a court order said not to. So now people are enraged that their communities are not safe and not getting due process and being sent to a prison way off of our borders, being under control. Just let me finish here. And I just think that is the difference. Also, we are in a different media time. There is social media. There is much more ways that the public gets their information, that these things now spread. So the fact that these things are happening unlawfully and people are not being trained is enraging the public. The polling is showing that. And the elections are showing that to date, and they will show it in the midterms. I just think Republicans are making a huge mistake here if they are not listening to the public. And I understand your sanctuary cities. You don't send 3,000 police officers into a community that has less than 1,000 local police. That doesn't even make logical sense.
Well, if your officers are being targeted, you need to protect them.
But how can the local police, how can they actually back up federal law enforcement when they don't even have enough officers to do that?
By handing the illegal immigrants over to the federal immigration enforcers in jails, in courthouses.
If they cooperated, we wouldn't see any of this.
We would not have raids in the streets.
I just disagree with that. I just think the way that they are doing this, it's totally unlawful. They are doing things without due process. They don't have training.
That
it's
claim is simply
unconstitutional.
not
A lot of
true,
these people had final orders of deportation against them for 15 years.
Yes, and they should be deported. That is absolutely fine. But the way that they are arresting these people and the way that they are in the streets and going into neighborhoods, why would the local police be able to back up?
Why are they in the streets? Why are they going to neighborhoods? Because the police and the local authorities will not cooperate with them.
They don't believe ICE is doing
rather
this
than handing
constitutionally.
over a person with a detainer against them in a secure facility, they let them out in the streets and they have to be chased down the street by
Border Patrol and ICE. They are in the streets because they do not believe that these people are being taken care of constitutionally and getting due process before they are deported, which is exactly how all of this started.
But if you've got a final order of deportation against you, your constitutional due process has already happened.
The claim that there's no due process is simply not true and is based on multiple legal cases that the Trump administration is fighting on right now, which, quite frankly, rogue leftist judges have gone along with leftist activists on that talking point.
They are still judges that have, I mean, like, that is it's
but
against
they're going
the law.
to be struck down by the Supreme Court, and
but
then that argument is going to be moot.
It's against the law to deport people without due process.
All right. Well, okay. That was a spirited discussion. Appreciate it.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.